I never expected to find my 10-year-old twins crying on their bare mattresses when I got home from work that Tuesday. The room that once held their childhood had been emptied, belongings crammed into our damp basement. My mother stood in the doorway, chin raised. "Our other grandson deserves the best rooms," she declared, gesturing to my brother's smirking son. My father nodded in agreement. Something inside me broke, but I kept my face neutral, turned to my devastated children, and simply said, "Pack your bags." My parents thought they had won. They had no idea what I had been planning for months. Let me back up and introduce myself. My name is Campbell, and at 34 years old, I found myself in a position I never imagined. A single father to twins, Lucy and Mason, struggling to rebuild our lives after their mother walked out on us for her boss. The divorce had been messy, leaving me temporarily financially drained and emotionally exhausted. 6 months ago, I made the difficult decision to move back in with my parents. Their 4-bedroom suburban home in Minnesota had plenty of space, and when they offered to let us stay while I got back on my feet, it seemed like a blessing. The twins were 10 years old then, still reeling from watching their family fall apart. I thought being around their grandparents might provide some stability during this chaotic time. Looking back, I should have known better. My parents had always been critical of my choices, from my decision to marry Amber right after college to my career path that prioritized work-life balance over climbing the corporate ladder. But desperation makes you overlook red flags, and I genuinely believed they would put their grandchildren first. The first few weeks seemed promising. Mom made special pancakes for the twins on Saturday mornings, and Dad taught Mason how to fix a bicycle chain. The kids had separate rooms upstairs across from mine, decorated with their own belongings we had managed to keep in the divorce. I paid my parents' rent, contributed to household expenses, and took on chores around the house. It felt like we might actually make this arrangement work. Then my younger brother Scott started visiting more frequently with his wife Pamela and their 9-year-old son Aiden. Scott had always been the golden child in our family. Star athlete, straight A student, and now a successful business owner with a picture-perfect family. I loved my brother, but there had always been an unspoken competition that I inevitably lost in our parents' eyes. I should have noticed the subtle changes. My mother would save Aiden's favorite cookies but forget that Lucy was allergic to walnuts. My father would cancel plans with Mason to attend Aiden's baseball games. Small things that seemed insignificant until they formed a pattern. By then, I had secured a promising position at a software company. The pay was better than my previous job, the hours were reasonable, and there was potential for growth. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about our future. I started setting aside money from each paycheck, dreaming of the day we could move into our own place. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones. Curious, I paused in the hallway, listening, as they discussed redecorating the twins' rooms. At first, I thought they were planning a surprise for Lucy and Mason, something to make them feel more at home. But then I heard my mother say, "We should get new furniture before Scott and Pamela visit next weekend. Aiden deserves better than those old dressers the twins are using." I stood frozen in place, my heart sinking as I realized what was happening. They were upgrading the rooms for my nephew while my children used secondhand furniture. I quietly retreated to my room, not confronting them that night, but feeling the first real crack in my gratitude. The next day, I came home early and discovered that they had indeed replaced the old desk in Mason's room with a brand new gaming setup. The tag was still attached to the chair, $400. Meanwhile, Mason had been asking for weeks for a small desk lamp so he could read at night without disturbing his sister if they needed to share a room. When I asked my mother about it, she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that's for when Aiden visits. He needs a proper place to do his computer activities. Scott says he might be some kind of programming genius." I swallowed my anger and bought Mason a lamp myself the next day. That evening, I updated my budget spreadsheet, increasing the amount I needed to save each month. Something told me we needed to get out sooner than I had originally planned. As weeks passed, the favoritism became increasingly obvious and painful. My parents bought Aiden expensive presents just because while forgetting Lucy and Mason's birthdays until I reminded them, They displayed Aiden's school certificates prominently on the refrigerator, but left the twins' achievements in a drawer. When Lucy won her school spelling bee, my mother merely nodded before changing the subject to Aiden's soccer tournament. My children noticed, of course. How could they not? Mason started becoming withdrawn, spending more time reading alone in his room. Lucy, always more outspoken, asked me one night as I tucked her in, "Why does Grandma like Aiden more than us?" The question broke my heart. I sat on the edge of her bed, struggling to find an explanation that wouldn't damage her self-esteem further. "Grandma and Grandpa love you both very much," I said, hating the lie but unwilling to burden a 10-year-old with adult complexities. "Sometimes people just show love differently." She looked at me with eyes too wise for her age. "No, Dad. They really don't. But it's okay. We have you." I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears, and promised myself that I would get us out of this situation as quickly as possible. The next day, I requested additional hours at work, taking on a special project that came with bonus potential. My boss, Trisha, was impressed with my dedication. She didn't know about my home situation, only that I was a recently divorced dad, trying to provide for my kids. When she offered me the opportunity to lead a new client initiative, I jumped at the chance despite the increased workload. One evening, after a particularly successful presentation, Trisha asked me to stay behind after the team left. "Campbell, you've been doing outstanding work these past few months," she said, reviewing my project reports. "The client specifically mentioned your attention to detail." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely proud but anxious to get home before my parents could make another decision that hurt my children. She closed the folder and looked at me directly. "We're creating a senior manager position for the expanded client portfolio. The job is yours if you want it." I nearly fell out of my chair. The promotion would come with a substantial salary increase, nearly doubling my current income. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Trisha misinterpreted my silence. "I know it's more responsibility," she said quickly. "Take the weekend to think about it." "I don't need the weekend," I replied, finding my voice. "I'd be honored to accept." On the drive home, I calculated what this would mean for our savings plan. At the new salary, we could potentially move out within 2 months rather than the 6 I had budgeted for. My good mood evaporated when I arrived home to find Lucy sitting alone on the front porch, knees drawn to her chest. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked, sitting beside her. "Grandma took Mason and Aiden for ice cream," she explained, her voice small. "She said I talked too much and would embarrass them at the fancy place they were going." The familiar anger bubbled up, but I pushed it down for her sake. "Well, their loss," I said, standing and offering my hand. "How about you and I go get some ice cream of our own? I know a place that has those sprinkles you like." Her smile was worth every extra minute of sleep I'd lose working late to make up for the time. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, I confronted my mother in the kitchen. The exclusion of Lucy was deliberate and cruel, and I told her so in measured tones, careful to keep my voice down. She sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Lucy is just so loud, Campbell. Always chattering about nonsense." Aiden was meeting some of Scott's business associates' sons. "We needed to make a good impression." "She's 10 years old, Mom," I said, gripping the counter to stay calm. "She's supposed to be enthusiastic and talkative." "Well," my mother sniffed. "When I was raising you boys, children knew to be seen and not heard. Pamela has done a wonderful job with Aiden. Perhaps you could take some parenting tips from her." I bit back the retort that rose to my lips. There was no point arguing with her when she was like this. Instead, I excused myself and went to my room where I could research apartments in private. As I scrolled through rental listings, my phone buzzed with a text from Scott. "Sorry about today. Mom told me Lucy wasn't feeling well. Just found out that wasn't true." He added a grimacing emoji. I appreciated the apology but noted he hadn't actually stood up to our mother or included Lucy himself. That was Scott's classic avoidance of conflict while trying to maintain his nice guy image. I was about to respond when another text came through. "By the way, don't mention this to Mom and Dad yet, but we're having some business trouble. Might need to stay with them for a few weeks while we sort things out. Pam and Aiden would come too. Hope that won't be weird with all of us there." I stared at the message in disbelief. My brother, the supposed business genius, was about to move his family into our already tense household situation. And based on past experience, I knew exactly whose comfort would be prioritized when that happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lucy's face sitting alone on that porch, about Mason's increasing silence, about the casual cruelty my parents displayed toward their own grandchildren. By morning, Id made a decision that would change everything. I would no longer aim for an apartment. With my new salary, I could qualify for a mortgage on a modest house in a good school district, somewhere my children could put down roots and never feel unwelcome again. 2 weeks later, Scott's family arrived with enough luggage for a month-long stay. My parents welcomed them like returning heroes, preparing Scott's favorite foods and setting up the guest room with fresh flowers and expensive chocolates on the pillows. No such welcome had greeted us when we'd moved in with nothing but essential belongings after the divorce. Aiden, now firmly established as the golden grandchild, immediately began commandeering the twins' belongings. When Mason found Aiden playing with his treasured collection of model airplanes without permission, my father scolded Mason for being selfish. "You need to learn to share," he said, while Aiden continued to disassemble the painstakingly constructed models. "Aiden is your guest." "But Grandpa," Mason protested quietly, "those took me weeks to build." "Well, maybe you could learn something from your cousin," my father replied. "Aiden built a real drone with his science club. These little toys are for younger kids anyway." I entered the room just in time to see Mason's face crumple before he masked his hurt. He silently retreated to the backyard where he sat alone on the swing set. When I tried to comfort him, he shrugged away from my touch. "It's fine, Dad," he said in a voice that was anything but fine. "Grandpa's right. They're just toys." That night, I noticed Mason had quietly packed away all his model airplanes, hiding them under his bed where Aiden wouldn't find them. Meanwhile, Pamela had taken to offering unsolicited parenting advice at every opportunity. She criticized everything from the twins' bedtimes to their table manners, always with a sugary smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lucy, sweetie," she said during dinner one evening, "ladies don't put their elbows on the table. Look how nicely Aiden sits." Lucy, who had been animated while telling a story about her science project, immediately withdrew, placing her hands in her lap and staring at her plate. "Actually," I interjected, "I think Lucy's enthusiasm is more important than perfect etiquette right now." "Please continue your story, Lucy," my mother huffed. "Really, Campbell? You're not doing her any favors by encouraging bad manners." Pamela's right. I noticed Pamela's smug expression and felt my patience wearing thinner by the day. Later that week, Lucy's teacher emailed me concerned about her sudden reluctance to participate in class discussions. Mason's grades were slipping too. The situation was affecting them deeply, and I felt powerless to shield them while we remained under my parents' roof. With Scott's family now occupying the guest room, our already limited space felt claustrophobic. The shared bathroom became a battleground, with Pamela leaving passive-aggressive notes about proper cleaning techniques and consideration for others. The twins were expected to accommodate everyone else's schedules and preferences, while their own needs were consistently overlooked. I began spending more time at work, partly to accelerate our escape plan, and partly because the atmosphere at home had become unbearable. The guilt of leaving my children to navigate this toxic environment weighed heavily, but I reminded myself that every extra hour meant we'd get out sooner. One evening, I arrived home late after meeting with a realtor during my lunch break. The realtor had shown me photos of a promising 4-bedroom house with a backyard and a tree perfect for a swing. The price was at the upper end of my budget, but with my promotion and consistent overtime, it was within reach. I found my mother and Pamela sitting at the kitchen table, cups of tea before them, speaking in hushed tones that immediately ceased when I entered. "Working late again?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting she didn't believe me. "The twins, 8 hours ago. There's a plate in the fridge." "Thank you," I said, too tired to address her implication. "How were Lucy and Mason today?" Pamela and my mother exchanged a look that sent warning signals through my exhausted brain. "Actually," Pamela said with affected concern, "Aiden mentioned that Mason pushed him during recess. We've been discussing whether Mason might benefit from speaking to someone about his anger issues." "Mason doesn't have anger issues," I replied. my own anger rising despite my efforts to remain calm. And he's never been aggressive with anyone. Well, boys will be boys, my mother said dismissively. But Aiden is smaller than Mason. We wouldn't want anyone getting hurt. I knew for a fact that Aiden was both taller and heavier than my son, but pointing this out would only lead to another circular argument where facts were irrelevant against their preferred narrative. Instead, I went upstairs to check on the twins. They were both in Lucy's room, huddled together reading by flashlight, though it wasn't yet their bedtime. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I asked, flipping the light switch. "Grandma said we need to keep quiet because Aiden has a headache," Lucy explained. "But he's playing video games in Mason's room with the volume up." I closed my eyes briefly, counting to 10 in my head. "How about we go out for ice cream?" I suggested impulsively. Their faces lit up simultaneously, the first genuine smiles I'd seen in weeks. After our ice cream escape, I tucked them into bed and then retreated to my room to check my bank account. The numbers were promising. Between my salary increase, reduced spending, and what remained from the divorce settlement I had never mentioned to my family, we were closer to our goal than I'd realized. The next morning, I was preparing the twins' lunches when I overheard a conversation that made my blood boil. "I've been thinking," my father said to Scott over coffee, "now that your situation is more complicated, perhaps you should stay here longer. The housing market is terrible for buying right now anyway." "We couldn't impose," Scott replied without conviction. "Nonsense. This is your home too. Besides, we barely notice Campbell and the twins with their schedules. There's plenty of room for everyone." I stood frozen, lunch bags forgotten in my hands. They were planning for Scott's family to move in permanently, without even consulting me. My parents had been using the rent money I paid them to fund special activities and purchases for Aiden. The same week I'd had to tell Mason we couldn't afford new sneakers, though his were falling apart. My mother had bought Aiden an expensive gaming system just because he's such a good boy. That afternoon, I called the realtor and made an offer on the house she'd shown me. By some miracle, it was accepted the same day. As I signed the preliminary paperwork during my lunch break, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Soon, my children would have rooms of their own, where no one could make them feel unwelcome or unworthy. Soon we would be free. 2 weeks before closing on our new house, an unexpected development accelerated my timeline. During a company meeting, my boss announced that our team had secured a major client, resulting in immediate bonuses for key contributors. As project lead, I received a substantial check that would cover moving expenses and essential furniture for our new home. That evening, while the twins were doing homework, I slipped away to make final arrangements with the realtor. Everything was falling into place more smoothly than I had dared to hope. The house inspection had revealed only minor issues, easily addressed before we moved in. The mortgage had been approved at a favorable rate, thanks to my improved financial situation. We were scheduled to close in 14 days, and I had already arranged for movers to come the following day. I hadn't told anyone about the house, not even the twins. After months of disappointment, I wanted to be absolutely certain before getting their hopes up. But that night, as I heard Aiden complaining loudly about sharing his bathroom with my children, I decided it was time to let them in on our secret. I waited until everyone else was occupied downstairs, then quietly entered Lucy's room where both twins had taken to spending their evenings. They looked up from their books with identical expressions of caution, a learned response that broke my heart. "Can we talk?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I have something important to show you." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos the realtor had sent. The first showed a 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wide front porch. The second revealed a spacious living room with a fireplace. Then came images of 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modern kitchen, and a backyard with mature trees. "What is this place?" Lucy asked, leaning closer to see. "It's our new home," I replied, watching their faces carefully. "Or it will be. In 2 weeks." For a moment, neither child reacted. Then Mason looked up, eyes wide with disbelief, and the first spark of hope I'd seen in months. "Really, Dad? Our own house? Not an apartment?" "Really," I confirmed. 4 bedrooms, so you each get your own. And the 4th can be a playroom or study space, whatever you want. "When do we go?" Lucy whispered, as if afraid speaking too loudly would make the opportunity vanish. 2 weeks from now. But we need to keep this our secret until then. Can you do that?" They nodded solemnly, their previous despondency replaced with suppressed excitement. I showed them more photos, pointing out features I thought they'd appreciate. The window seat in Lucy's potential room, the built-in bookshelves, perfect for Mason's collection, the backyard big enough for the trampoline they'd been asking for since the divorce. For the first time in months, we laughed together as we planned the decoration of their new rooms. Lucy wanted purple walls and constellation decals on the ceiling. Mason envisioned a space theme with planets hanging from the ceiling. I promised to make both visions reality once we were settled. But Dad, Mason said suddenly, his smile fading. What about Grandma and Grandpa? Won't they be mad if we leave? The question hung heavily between us. I chose my words carefully, wanting to be honest, without burdening them with adult conflicts. Sometimes families need a little space from each other, I explained. I think we'll all be happier with our own homes. And you can still see Grandma and Grandpa, just not every day. Neither child seemed particularly disappointed by this prospect, which spoke volumes about how unwelcome they'd been made to feel. As I tucked them in that night, I noticed a resilience in their expressions that had been missing for too long. Just 2 more weeks, I thought. 2 weeks, until we could start fresh. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from the mortgage company confirming our closing date. I was reading it in the kitchen when my mother entered, already dressed for her weekly bridge game. "Campbell," she said without preamble, "your father and I want to have a family meeting tonight. Scott has something important to discuss, and we need to talk about some permanent household arrangements." Her tone made it clear these arrangements had already been decided without my input. In the past, I would have nodded and accepted whatever they planned. This time, I merely shrugged. "Sure, Mom, whatever you say." She looked momentarily surprised by my easy acquiescence but seemed to take it as submission. If only she knew. That evening, all the adults gathered in the living room after the children were supposedly in bed. I knew the twins were probably listening from the staircase, but I didn't expose them. They deserved to hear what their grandparents really thought. "As you know," my father began, "Scott's business situation has become more complicated than anticipated." Scott and Pamela sat close together on the couch, looking uncomfortable but expectant. My brother cleared his throat. "The short version is that we need to sell our house," he admitted. "The business loan used it as collateral, and with the current setbacks, what your brother is trying to say," my mother interrupted, "is that they'll be staying with us indefinitely while they rebuild. Family helps family through difficult times." I noticed she hadn't expressed this sentiment when I'd needed help after the divorce. In fact, they'd made it clear my stay was conditional and temporary from the beginning. "We've been discussing the best way to arrange things," my father continued. "Obviously, Scott and Pamela will keep the guest room. Aiden should have his own room too, given his age." "Where will my children sleep?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My mother gave me a look that suggested I was being difficult. "Well, the twins can share the smaller bedroom upstairs. Or we thought perhaps the basement could be converted into a proper living area for your family." The basement, a damp, poorly lit space with concrete floors and exposed pipes, where they stored old furniture and holiday decorations. Where my children would be literally beneath the rest of the family in status and comfort. "I see," I said, maintaining a neutral expression that seemed to reassure them. They had expected an argument and were relieved by my apparent compliance. "It's the most sensible arrangement," my father declared. "Scott's situation is temporary until his business recovers. Your situation is more long-term." The implication was clear. They believed I would never succeed enough to provide a proper home for my children, that we would be dependent on their charity indefinitely, that my brother's failure was temporary while mine was intrinsic. "We'll discuss the details more tomorrow," my mother concluded. "Scott has a promising lead on a new investor he's meeting in the morning." As the meeting broke up, I received a text notification. Attempting discretion, I checked my phone under the coffee table. It was from the realtor. "Great news. Sellers agreed to early closing. Can you sign papers Friday instead of waiting until next week?" I typed a quick affirmative response, fighting to keep the smile from my face. 3 days. We only needed to endure 3 more days in this house. I passed Scott in the hallway as we headed to our respective rooms. He at least had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm sorry about this," he muttered. "I know it's not ideal." "Don't worry about it," I replied with genuine lightness. "Things have a way of working out." He seemed puzzled by my response, but was too preoccupied with his own problems to question my unexpected optimism. As I turned toward the stairs, I caught Pamela watching our interaction with narrowed eyes. She, unlike my brother, sensed something was off about my reaction. I would need to be more careful for the next few days. That night, I lay awake, planning our escape. The movers were scheduled for Saturday morning. I would sign the closing papers Friday afternoon during my lunch break, which would actually be an extended absence covered by accumulated personal time. The twins and I would spend Friday night in the new house with just air mattresses and essential supplies. The movers would bring our belongings Saturday. I had already quietly gathered our important documents and irreplaceable items, storing them in a small safe in my office at work. Everything else could be replaced if necessary. The thought of seeing my children's faces when they walked into their new home for the first time kept me awake with anticipation. Soon, I promised myself. Very soon. The text message from Mason came at 2:15 on Thursday afternoon, just as I was finishing a client call. "Dad, please come home. Grandma and Grandpa did something bad." My stomach dropped. I immediately texted back. "On my way. Are you both safe?" The three dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, "Not hurt. But Grandma put all our stuff in the basement. They gave our rooms to Aiden." So, I stared at the message in disbelief. They had actually done it. Without discussion, without warning, they had displaced my children from their living spaces. I grabbed my jacket and laptop, stopping only to tell Trisha I had a family emergency. "Take whatever time you need," she said, noting my expression. "We can handle things here." The 20-minute drive home felt like hours. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm despite the rage building inside me. Tomorrow, I reminded myself. Just one more day until the closing. We could sleep on the air mattresses tonight if necessary, and leave first thing in the morning. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Lucy sitting on the front steps, her eyes red from crying. She ran to me as soon as I stepped out of the car. "Dad, they took our rooms," she sobbed against my shirt. "All my stuff is in boxes in the basement, and they broke my butterfly lamp." I held her tightly, stroking her hair. "Where's your brother?" "In the basement with our stuff. He won't come upstairs." Taking Lucy's hand, I entered the house. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded defensively across her chest. My father sat at the dining table, newspaper open as if nothing unusual had happened. Scott was nowhere to be seen, but Pamela was supervising Aiden as he arranged his gaming equipment on what had been Mason's desk. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My mother lifted her chin. "We discussed this last night, Campbell. The arrangements needed to change. Aiden needs proper space for his computer activities and school projects." "We discussed making changes eventually," I replied, struggling to keep my tone even. Not emptying my children's rooms without warning while they were at school. And I was at work. "It needed to be done sometime," my father interjected without looking up from his paper. "Might as well rip the Band-Aid off. The basement will be fine for the twins once we get some proper lights down there." I looked toward what had been Lucy's room. Through the open door, I could see her belongings had been completely removed. Aiden's sports trophies already dominated the shelves. Her pink bedspread had been replaced with a navy comforter. "Where are the kids' beds?" I asked. "In the basement," my mother replied as if it were obvious. "Though they're rather bulky down there. We thought perhaps bunk beds would be more space efficient." The casual cruelty of it all nearly broke my composure. They had dismantled my children's private spaces, the only security they had left after the divorce, without a moment's consideration for their feelings. "I need to check on Mason," I said, heading toward the basement door. The scene downstairs was even worse than I had imagined. Our belongings had been haphazardly piled in the center of the unfinished space. Mason's bed frame was propped against one wall, the mattress balanced precariously on its side. Lucy's butterfly lamp lay in pieces among tangled bedding. Mason himself sat on an overturned storage bin, methodically placing his books into a cardboard box. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. His face was dry but blank, in a way that concerned me more than tears would have. "I'm packing," he said simply. "Since we have to live down here now." I crouched beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No, buddy, we don't." "But Grandma said." "I don't care what Grandma said," I replied firmly. "This isn't acceptable." Mason's eyes widened slightly at my tone. I rarely contradicted my parents openly, a habit from my own childhood that I now recognized as part of the problem. "What are we going to do?" he whispered. I glanced around to ensure we were alone, then lowered my voice. "Remember the house I showed you pictures of? We're going there tomorrow. Tonight, we'll pack what we absolutely need. The rest can wait for the movers on Saturday." For the first time since I'd arrived home, Mason's expression lightened. "Really? We don't have to stay here?" "Really," I confirmed. "But let's not tell Grandma and Grandpa just yet. Can you and Lucy quietly pack a backpack with pajamas and clothes for tomorrow? I need to talk to the adults upstairs." He nodded, a hint of his old determination returning as he straightened his shoulders. "I'll tell Lucy. We'll be ready." I squeezed his shoulder, then headed back upstairs, my resolve strengthened by the injustice I'd witnessed. In the kitchen, I found my parents and Scott's family gathered for coffee, as if it were any normal afternoon. The contrast between their casual comfort and my children's distress fueled my controlled anger. "The basement is unacceptable," I stated flatly, interrupting their conversation. "It's damp, poorly lit, and not suitable for children to sleep in." My mother sighed dramatically. "Always so dramatic, Campbell. It's temporary until we can renovate properly." "And when will that be?" I challenged. My parents exchanged glances. "Well," my father hedged, "these things take time. Contractors are very busy these days." Besides, Pamela added with poorly disguised satisfaction, "Beggars can't be choosers. We all have to make sacrifices during difficult times." I noticed Scott at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, though not enough to actually speak up for his niece and nephew. "I see," I said, maintaining an unnervingly calm demeanor. "And I suppose those sacrifices don't extend to Aiden giving up his second bedroom for his cousins?" "Aiden needs space for his creative development," my mother replied defensively. "The child is gifted. His teacher says he might qualify for the advanced placement program next year." "And my children's development doesn't matter?" I asked quietly. My father finally set down his newspaper, irritation clear on his face. "Look, Campbell, we're doing you a favor letting you stay here at all. Most men your age don't need to live with their parents. If you'd made better choices." "Like Scott?" I interrupted, nodding toward my brother. "Whose business is failing and who needs to sell his house to cover his debts?" Scott flushed. "That's different. It's a temporary setback due to market conditions." "Of course it is," I replied, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. "Just like my divorce was a temporary setback. Except when it happens to me, it's a personal failure. When it happens to Scott, it's circumstances beyond his control." My mother stood up, outrage written across her features. "That's quite enough. After everything we've done for you and those children, what exactly have you done for my children?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "Made them feel unwelcome in their own home? Compared them constantly to their cousin? Moved their belongings to the basement without their permission? Broken Lucy's favorite lamp? Please, tell me what I should be grateful for." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. No one seemed to know how to respond to my uncharacteristic defiance. Finally, my father attempted to reassert control. "If you're unhappy with the arrangements, perhaps you should look for your own place," he suggested coldly. "Though I doubt you could afford anything decent on your salary." I smiled then, a smile that seemed to unnerve them all. "You know what? I think that's an excellent suggestion." Without another word, I turned and walked away, heading down to the basement where my children waited. I found them sitting side by side on an old couch, backpacks already packed beside them. Their faces lit up when they saw me. "Are we really leaving tomorrow, Dad?" Lucy asked, hope battling with caution in her voice. I sat between them, putting an arm around each. "Actually," I said, "I think we'll leave tonight. How would you like to camp out in our new house a day early?" Their enthusiastic responses were all the confirmation I needed. I pulled out my phone and called the realtor, explaining the situation in vague terms and asking if we could possibly get the keys tonight instead of tomorrow. To my relief, she agreed to meet me at the property at 7, having already received the final paperwork from the mortgage company. Pack whatever else you absolutely need for the night, I instructed the twins. We'll come back for the rest with the movers on Saturday. As the children gathered their essentials, I went to my room and packed quickly and efficiently. Years of business travel had made me adept at determining what was truly necessary. Clothes for tomorrow, toiletries, phone charger, laptop. Everything else could wait. I made a quick call to confirm the movers were still set for Saturday morning, then texted Tricia that I would be working remotely tomorrow. With those details arranged, I returned to the basement to help the twins finish packing. By 6:30, we were ready to leave. I loaded our backpacks into the trunk of my car while the twins waited by the front door. My parents watched from the living room window, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning realization that something significant was happening. "Are we saying goodbye?" Mason asked quietly as I ushered them toward the car. I considered the question carefully. "Not yet. We'll come back for the rest of our things on Saturday. Then we can decide what kind of goodbye is appropriate." As we pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my mother stepping onto the front porch, her face a mask of disbelief. She had never imagined I would actually leave, let alone have somewhere to go. The power dynamics she had taken for granted were shifting before her eyes, and she didn't know how to process it. In the rearview mirror, I saw Lucy turn around to look at the house one last time. She didn't seem sad, just contemplative. "Do you think they'll miss us?" she asked. I replied carefully, "they'll miss the idea of us. But I'm not sure they ever really saw us for who we are." Mason nodded as if this made perfect sense to him. "That's why we have to go, right? So people will see us." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. Exactly right, buddy. Now, who's ready to see our new home? We arrived at the realtor's office just before 7. Angela, the realtor who had helped me find the house, greeted us with a warm smile that widened when she saw the twins. "So these are the famous Lucy and Mason," she said, crouching slightly to meet them at eye level. "Your dad has told me all about you. Are you excited to see your new house?" Lucy nodded enthusiastically, while Mason, ever more reserved, offered a polite, "Yes, ma'am." "Well then, let's not keep you waiting," Angela said, retrieving a set of keys from her desk drawer. "I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. I just need to grab the final paperwork." As we drove to the new house, the twins grew increasingly animated, pointing out landmarks and speculating about what their new school would be like. I hadn't seen them this excited in months, and their happiness confirmed I was making the right decision, however sudden our departure might seem. The house looked even better than in the photos. A 2-story colonial, with a freshly painted blue exterior and white trim. It sat on a quarter-acre lot in a quiet neighborhood with mature trees. The front yard was small but well-maintained, with flower beds that would bloom beautifully in spring. A concrete path led to a covered porch wide enough for chairs where we could sit on summer evenings. "Is this really ours, Dad?" Lucy whispered as we pulled into the driveway. "It really is," I confirmed, feeling a surge of pride and accomplishment. "Let's go check it out." Angela arrived moments later, official documents and keys in hand. After a quick review of the paperwork and my signature on several dotted lines, she handed over the keys with a flourish. "Congratulations, Campbell. You're officially a homeowner." The twins couldn't contain their excitement as I unlocked the front door. They rushed inside, footsteps echoing in the empty space as they explored each room, calling out discoveries to each other. "Dad, my room has a window seat." "Dad, there's a tree right outside my window." Their joy was infectious. Angela smiled as she prepared to leave, handing me a folder with information about the house systems, local utilities, and neighborhood resources. "It's always special, seeing kids this excited about a new home," she remarked. "You've done a good thing here, Campbell." After she left, I joined the twins in their exploration. The house wasn't large by suburban standards, but at 1,600 square feet, it felt spacious compared to our cramped quarters at my parents' home. The main floor contained a living room with a brick fireplace, a dining area that opened to the kitchen, and a small home office that could double as a guest room if needed. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms and a full bathroom, while the main floor had a half bath off the kitchen. "Can I really have this room, Dad?" Mason asked, standing in the doorway of the largest bedroom after the master. The walls were currently a neutral beige, but I could already envision them painted the deep blue he had described when planning his space theme. "Absolutely," I replied. "We'll get your bed set up on Saturday, but for tonight, we'll camp out on air mattresses in the living room." "Like a slumber party?" Lucy asked, clapping her hands. "Exactly like a slumber party," I agreed. We unloaded the car, bringing in our overnight bags, and the air mattresses I had secretly purchased last week. I set them up in the living room while the twins continued exploring, opening every cabinet and closet with the thoroughness of young detectives. As I prepared a simple dinner from the supplies I'd brought, my phone buzzed with texts. My mother, asking where we were. My father, demanding I return immediately to discuss things like adults. Scott, surprisingly, asking if the kids were okay. I responded only to Scott, a brief message confirming the twins were safe, and that we would return on Saturday for our belongings. The evening passed in a bubble of happiness as we ate pizza on the living room floor and played card games by lantern light. Without internet or television, we talked more than we had in weeks, making plans for each room and discussing how we would arrange our furniture when it arrived. "Can I paint my room purple?" "Really purple?" Lucy asked, eyes shining. "Really purple," I confirmed. "And Mason can have his space theme with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling." "What about the extra room, Dad?" Mason inquired. "The one upstairs beside the bathroom?" I had been thinking about that. "Well, we could make it a playroom or a study space for homework. Or maybe a library, since you both love reading so much. We can decide together." "A library," they both said simultaneously, then laughed at their unexpected agreement. As I tucked them into their air mattresses later that night, I marveled at how different they seemed away from my parents' influence. Lighter, more themselves. Lucy hummed as she arranged her pillow, while Mason had already pulled out a book, eager to read in a space where no one would criticize him for it. "Dad?" Lucy asked as I prepared to turn off the lantern. "Are Grandma and Grandpa going to be mad at us tomorrow?" I considered the question carefully. "They might be upset at first," I admitted. "But this isn't about punishing them. It's about us having a home where everyone feels valued." She nodded thoughtfully. "I like feeling valued." "Me too," Mason added without looking up from his book. "That's the most important thing," I told them. "More important than what Grandma or Grandpa or anyone else thinks." The next morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, a lifetime habit I'd never been able to break. For a few moments, I lay still on my air mattress, listening to the twins' steady breathing and the unfamiliar sounds of our new house. The furnace humming, the gentle tick of the kitchen clock, a bird singing outside the living room window. "This is ours," I thought with a surge of satisfaction. This quiet moment in this ordinary house was more precious to me than any luxury my parents' home could have offered. I slipped out quietly to prepare breakfast on the camping stove I'd brought. As I worked, my phone buzzed again. More messages from my parents, increasing in urgency. I silenced the notifications without reading them. Whatever drama they were creating could wait until tomorrow when we returned for our belongings. The twins woke to the smell of pancakes, emerging tousle-haired and sleepy-eyed from their makeshift beds. We ate at the kitchen counter, perched on the only 3 stools the previous owners had left behind. Everything felt like an adventure, even washing dishes in the sink with dish soap I'd remembered to pack at the last minute. I had taken the day off work, so we spent it preparing for the movers. We created floor plans for furniture placement, measured windows for curtains, and made lists of immediate necessities. In the afternoon, we visited a nearby home improvement store, selecting paint colors for their bedrooms and basic supplies we would need before a proper grocery run. By evening, we had established a small beachhead of civilization in our empty house. The bathroom contained towels and toiletries. The kitchen had enough basic items to prepare simple meals. The twins' rooms each had a lamp and their selected paint swatches taped to the walls. As we ate takeout on our living room floor for the second night, I noticed both children seemed more relaxed and talkative than they had been in months. Lucy chattered about which books would go on which shelves in our planned library. Mason described his ideas for an astronomy corner in his room, complete with a telescope pointing out the window. We were just cleaning up our dinner when my phone rang. Scott's name flashed on the screen. "Should I answer it?" I asked the twins, wanting to include them in the decision. They exchanged a look, then Mason shrugged. "It's Uncle Scott, not Grandma. Maybe he's not mad." I accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Hello? Campbell." Scott's voice sounded strained. "Where are you guys? Mom and Dad are losing it." "We're at our new house," I replied simply. A pause. "Your what?" "Our new house. I bought a place. We moved out." Another, longer pause. "You bought a house? When? How?" "I've been planning it for months," I explained, keeping my tone neutral. "The promotion at work made it possible. We closed yesterday." "Why didn't you say anything?" Scott asked, sounding genuinely confused. "Would anyone have listened?" I countered. His silence was answer enough. "Look," I continued, "we're coming back tomorrow with movers to get our things. I'd appreciate it if you could make sure Mom and Dad don't interfere." "They're pretty upset," Scott admitted. "Dad's talking about changing the locks." The twins' eyes widened in alarm. I gave them a reassuring smile before responding. "That would be illegal. Our legal residence is still listed as their address, and we have a right to retrieve our belongings. If they try to prevent us, I'll involve the police." The firmness in my voice seemed to surprise my brother. "Jesus, Campbell. When did you get so? So what? Assertive? Confident?" Maybe when I realized no one else was going to stand up for my kids. Another uncomfortable silence. Then, unexpectedly, "I'm sorry. About the basement thing. I should have said something." The apology, though inadequate, was more than I had expected from Scott. "Yes, you should have. For what it's worth, Pamela and I had a huge fight about it last night. She kept saying they were doing us a favor, and I finally told her that's not how you treat family." I raised an eyebrow, surprised at this development. And nothing. She's sulking. Aiden's confused. Mom's crying. Dad's furious. It's a mess." Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my brother. He had always avoided conflict, preferring to maintain the peace even at the expense of justice. It couldn't have been easy for him to stand up to his wife and our parents. "We'll be there at 9 tomorrow with the movers," I said, softening my tone slightly. "It shouldn't take more than a few hours. After that, the twins and I will need some time to settle into our new place before we discuss what kind of relationship we want going forward." "I understand," Scott replied. "I'll make sure everyone behaves tomorrow." After hanging up, I turned to the twins. "How are you feeling about going back tomorrow?" They exchanged another of those silent communications that twins sometimes share. "Will we have to see Grandma and Grandpa?" Lucy asked. "Not if you don't want to," I assured her. "You can stay in the car while I supervise the movers." Mason shook his head. "I want to go in. I want to get my stuff myself." His determination surprised me. Mason had always been the more conflict avoidant of the twins, quieter and more likely to retreat when tensions rose. This new assertiveness was a welcome change. "Me too," Lucy declared, not to be outdone by her brother. "And I want to say goodbye to Aiden." "You do?" I asked, surprised. She nodded solemnly. "It's not his fault his mom and dad and grandma and grandpa are mean. He's just a kid like us." Her compassion humbled me. Despite everything, my daughter still saw the humanity in the cousin who had displaced her from her room. "All right then," I agreed. "We'll all go together. But if at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say the word and we'll leave." "Deal?" "Deal," they chorused, sealing our pact with solemn handshakes. That night, as the twins slept peacefully on their air mattresses, I sat by the living room window, looking out at our new neighborhood. Lights glowed in nearby houses, families going about their evening routines behind curtained windows. Soon, we would be part of this community, establishing our own routines and traditions in our own space. The thought filled me with a profound sense of peace. Tomorrow might bring conflict, but tonight, in this empty house that represented so much hope, I felt more confident than I had in years. Whatever happened, We would face it together, the three of us against the world if necessary. I checked my watch. 11:30. In less than 10 hours, we would return to my parents' house for the last time, officially ending this chapter of our lives and beginning a new one entirely of our own making. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. We arrived at my parents' house precisely at 9, pulling in behind the moving truck I had scheduled. The twins sat quietly in the back seat, dressed in their favorite outfits, as if armoring themselves for the confrontation ahead. Remember, I told them as we prepared to exit the car, we're just here for our belongings. If anyone says anything that makes you uncomfortable, you can wait in the car or with the movers. They nodded solemnly, shoulders squared with determination beyond their years. As we approached the front door, it swung open to reveal Scott, looking tired but resolved. "They're waiting in the living room," he said by way of greeting. I told them to let the movers do their job without interference. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciative of his support, however belated. The movers followed behind us, professional and efficient as they awaited instructions. I directed them first to the basement where most of our belongings had been unceremoniously dumped, then upstairs to retrieve the remaining items from our bedrooms and bathroom. In the living room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My mother sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, eyes red-rimmed but dry. My father stood by the fireplace, arms crossed defensively over his chest. Pamela occupied an armchair, Aiden perched uncomfortably on its arm. None of them spoke as we entered. "Good morning," I said, my tone polite but distant. "The movers will need access to the basement and our rooms upstairs. We should be done in a few hours." My mother's lip trembled, but my father spoke before she could. "I suppose you think you've made your point with this dramatic exit." "This isn't about making a point," I replied evenly. "It's about providing a home where my children feel valued and respected." "We've always valued the children," my mother protested, finding her voice. "Everything we did was for their own good." Lucy, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "You broke my butterfly lamp," she said quietly. "The one Mom gave me before she left. It was the last thing she gave me." The simple statement hung in the air, more damning than any accusation I could have made. My mother flinched as if physically struck. I didn't realize it was important," she stammered. "You never asked," Mason added, his voice steady despite the slight tremor in his hands. Aiden slid from his perch on the armchair, approaching the twins with uncertainty. "I didn't know they were putting your stuff in the basement," he said, addressing Mason directly. "I wouldn't have taken your room if I knew." To my surprise, Mason nodded acceptance of this awkward apology. "It's okay. We have better rooms now anyway. With doors that lock." This exchange seemed to break something in my mother. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she rose from the sofa, hands fluttering helplessly. "Campbell, please. This is unnecessary. We can work things out. The basement was just temporary, until we could rearrange things properly." "Mom," I said gently, "the basement was never the real issue. It was just the final straw. The real problem is that you've consistently made Lucy and Mason feel less important, less valued, and less welcome than their cousin." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes flickered guiltily toward my father. "It is true," I countered firmly. "You've compared them unfavorably to Aiden at every opportunity. You've excluded them from activities. You've dismissed their achievements while celebrating his. You've made it abundantly clear that in your hierarchy of grandchildren, they fall decidedly second." My father stepped forward, anger replacing his defensive posture. "Now listen here. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go. We provided a roof over your heads when that woman abandoned her responsibilities. That woman was your daughter-in-law for 8 years, I interrupted, and she's still Lucy and Mason's mother. Whatever happened between Amber and me doesn't change that." The twins moved closer to me, drawing strength from my calm defense. I placed a hand on each of their shoulders, a united front against the accusations. "The fact that you see providing temporary housing to your son and grandchildren as some extraordinary favor rather than what family simply does for each other says everything about why we need to leave," I continued. "We're not asking for special treatment, just basic respect and consideration." Scott, who had been watching from the doorway, finally spoke up. Dad, they're right. We wouldn't have tolerated it if someone treated Aiden the way the twins have been treated here. My father turned his glare on Scott. I didn't ask for your opinion. This situation is complicated enough without you playing both sides. I'm not playing both sides, Scott replied with uncharacteristic firmness. I'm acknowledging a truth that should have been addressed months ago. Upstairs, we could hear the movers efficiently packing and carrying our belongings. The process was moving faster than anticipated, probably because we had less than we thought. So many items had been left behind in the divorce, replaced with budget versions that wouldn't be missed if damaged during the hasty basement relocation. Pamela, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly stood. Perhaps we should give them space to collect their things, she suggested. Her tone conciliatory, in a way I had never heard before. Aiden, come help me in the kitchen. My nephew hesitated, looking between his parents and his cousins with confusion. Before following his mother, he stepped toward the twins. I'm sorry about your rooms, he said simply. And I'm sorry I broke your model airplane, Mason. I didn't mean to. Mason nodded acknowledgement, neither accepting nor rejecting the apology outright. Lucy, always quicker to forgive, offered a small smile. It's okay, she said. We have a new house now. You can visit sometime if your mom and dad say it's okay. This simple offer of reconciliation from my 10-year-old daughter accomplished what all the adult conversations had failed to do. The atmosphere in the room shifted, tension draining away like water through suddenly unclenched fingers. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. A new house, she repeated softly. You actually bought a house without telling us. I've been saving and planning for months, I explained, my voice gentler now. The promotion at work made it possible sooner than expected. Promotion? My father echoed, genuine surprise evident in his tone. You never mentioned a promotion. I shrugged slightly. There were a lot of things I didn't mention because no one ever asked. This simple truth seemed to land with unexpected impact. My parents exchanged glances, something unspoken passing between them. We should check on the movers, I said, breaking the moment. Kids, do you want to make sure they're packing everything you want to take? They nodded eagerly, relieved to escape the emotional tension of the living room. As they headed toward the stairs, my father cleared his throat. Campbell, he said, his voice gruff but lacking its earlier hostility, where is this house of yours? I hesitated, weighing how much information I wanted to share at this point. It's in Riverside Heights, about 20 minutes from here. His eyebrows rose slightly. Riverside Heights was a respectable neighborhood with good schools, not the downmarket apartment complex he had likely envisioned. That's a nice area, he conceded. Yes, it is, I agreed simply. The twins will be able to bike to school when the weather's good. Another awkward silence descended. My mother twisted her tissue between her fingers, clearly struggling with what to say next. Will we still see them? She finally asked. Vulnerability, replacing her earlier defensiveness. I met her gaze directly. That depends on you. The twins and I need some time to settle into our new home and establish our own routines. After that, we can discuss what kind of relationship might work for everyone. She nodded, accepting this conditional answer with surprising grace. I understand. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity as the movers efficiently loaded our belongings into their truck. The twins supervised with unexpected authority, ensuring nothing important was left behind. By 11:30, everything had been packed and loaded. We gathered in the front hallway for final goodbyes. Scott and Aiden stood together, my brother's hand resting supportively on his son's shoulder. Pamela hung back near the kitchen doorway, her expression unreadable. My parents stood side by side, looking suddenly older and uncertain. Well, my father said awkwardly, I suppose this is it. For now, I corrected gently. This isn't goodbye forever, just goodbye to living under the same roof. My mother stepped forward hesitantly. May I hug them before you go? I looked to the twins, leaving the decision entirely in their hands. After a moment's consideration, they both nodded, accepting her embrace with polite restraint. When she stepped back, tears glistened in her eyes again. Your butterfly lamp, she said suddenly to Lucy. I saved the pieces. I thought perhaps it could be repaired. Lucy's expression softened slightly. Maybe. Thank you for saving them. My mother hurried to retrieve a small box from the living room, handling it to Lucy with trembling hands. The wings are still intact. It's mainly the base that broke. This small gesture, this acknowledgement of something that mattered to my daughter, felt like the first genuine step toward healing. As we prepared to leave, Scott pulled me aside briefly. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, "for standing up for your kids, for making a new start. It couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted, "but it was necessary." He nodded understanding. "For what it's worth, I think this will be good for everyone in the long run. Sometimes, family dynamics need a shake-up." We shook hands, a more meaningful exchange than any hug could have been in that moment. Then, I gathered the twins, and we followed the moving truck to our new home. 3 months later, our house had transformed from an empty shell into a true home. Mason's room featured deep blue walls and a ceiling dotted with glow-in-the-dark stars arranged in accurate constellations. Lucy's purple sanctuary included a new butterfly lamp, painstakingly repaired by a local craftsman. The promised library held bookshelves filled with their growing collections, comfortable reading chairs, and a small desk for homework. My parents had maintained a respectful distance, sending birthday cards to the twins with thoughtful gifts that acknowledged their individual interests. 2 weeks ago, we had invited them for dinner, a tentative first step toward establishing a new, healthier relationship. The evening had been slightly awkward but generally positive, ending with plans for a monthly family dinner moving forward. Scott and his family had found a smaller house not far from ours. His business was slowly recovering, and our relationship had improved significantly now that we were on more equal footing. Aiden had even joined the twins for movie night the previous weekend, the beginnings of a genuine friendship forming without the toxic competition our parents had fostered. As for me, the promotion had led to additional responsibilities and recognition at work. I had been named department head last month, a position that came with both increased salary and more flexibility to be present for my children. Tonight, as we sat around our dining table, enjoying our Friday pizza tradition, I looked at my children's faces and saw contentment that had been missing for too long. They laughed easily, shared stories from school without hesitation, and moved through our home with the confidence of knowing they belonged exactly where they were. "Dad," Mason said as we cleaned up after dinner, "remember when we had to sleep on air mattresses that first night?" I nodded, smiling at the memory. "Our camping adventure. That was my favorite night ever," Lucy declared. "Loading plates into the dishwasher. Even better than when we got our real beds." "Really?" I asked, surprised. "Why's that?" She thought for a moment, then answered with simple wisdom. "Because that was the night we became a real family again. Just us three, figuring it out together." Mason nodded agreement. "Plus we had pizza on the floor." I laughed, ruffling his hair affectionately. Pizza on the floor does make everything better. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, I sat on our front porch swing, looking out at the quiet neighborhood street. Lights glowed in windows, bicycles rested in driveways, and the distant sound of children laughing drifted on the evening breeze. The journey that had brought us here hadn't been easy. It had required courage to stand up to my parents, determination to build a new life, and faith that we could create something better together. But sitting here now, in the peace of our own home, I knew without doubt that it had been worth every difficult moment. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away from people who hurt you. It's believing you deserve better in the first place. My children had taught me that lesson, with their quiet dignity in the face of rejection and their boundless capacity for joy when given the chance to thrive. In the end, the basement incident had been a gift of clarity. It showed me exactly what my parents thought of us, removing any illusions about our place in the family hierarchy. And in that painful revelation came the freedom to create something new and beautiful. A family defined not by obligation or comparison, but by genuine love and respect. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family harmony and personal dignity? How do you balance honoring family relationships while still maintaining healthy boundaries? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the family we choose and create is the one that truly feels like home. Until next time, Take care of yourselves and each other.